just sat there in awkward silence going, why is he ghosting me? And this was off your advice. Just a really gentle, short email saying, is there anything that has been upsetting or anything that's got in the way of our conversation? And I got the best, kindest, warmest reply in gratitude for my honesty.
Hey, I'm Brian Gonzales, CEO of Wealth Quotient and the host of Relational Capital. Each week, I'm sitting down with leaders who regularly engage with the ultra wealthy across luxury, financial services, and philanthropy to explore how real relationships are built and sustained at the highest levels of wealth and influence. My guest this week is Jacqueline Williams. She's the head of philanthropy at the Leukaemia Foundation in Australia. The Leukaemia Foundation's mission is to cure and conquer every blood cancer and achieve the goal of 0 lives lost to blood cancer by 2035. Jack is an incredibly talented and experienced fundraiser and has raised millions in philanthropic dollars as she has built relationships with some of Australia's most generous and influential donors. I have Jacqueline Williams with me today. Hi, Jack.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, it's so great to have you. We're going to have some fun. Jack is at the Leukaemia Foundation all the way down under. She's joining us from Australia today. So thankful to have you with us. So why don't you tell us a little about yourself? Tell us about your role, the Leukaemia Foundation, and how you got into this line of work. We'd love to get to know you.
Thank you, Brian. And again, thank you for having me. This is a delight. So I've been with the Leukaemia Foundation for 3.5 years now. The foundation exists to improve the quality of life of everyone impacted by blood cancer. Sadly, roughly 1 in 12 Australians will be diagnosed in their lifetime, and there are more people now than ever before living with the disease. Sadly, 1 in 3 will not survive for 5 years after their diagnosis. So the Leukaemia Foundation relies so much on the generosity of major donors and partners to direct their investment to ensure that every Australian with blood cancer has access to the best possible care and treatments, regardless of where they live, their circumstances, or their background. So as head of philanthropy, I lead a team of 8 staff members, and our key role is to steward generous and loyal donors, major donors, gift and will donors, and trusts and foundations. I came into the role by accident. After many years of teaching, I was asked to raise funds to build a performing arts centre in the year 1999. I didn't hesitate. I took a leap of faith, and as they say, the rest is history. Here I am.
Well, and you've obviously found out this was something you were really good at, right? And it's so funny the things that we get into that we don't realize how good we're going to be. So you were teaching, somebody asked you to help raise money, and all these years later, you've built an impressive career and raised millions and millions of dollars, right, through the years. So, so that being said, the wealthy in Australia are probably a lot like they are in other parts of the world. I do say I believe the ultra wealthy are different for some very specific reasons, but we'll save that discussion for another day. But I'm curious, right? As you think about how you have just excelled, how you've led teams to do this, you know, trust is hard. The name of the podcast is Relational Capital, and I say this all the time. You know, relational capital really is about trust. But building and earning trust and respect with the ultra wealthy isn't easy. I'm curious, what have you found? What earns trust? What earns respect? Are there lessons that you've learned and stories you can tell about how you've been able to do that successfully through the years?
There is, and I've chosen one in particular because it's really close to me and a recent example. But we know the principles. You know, you have to have a deep understanding of what emotionally appeals to donors, you know, what drives their commitment, what do they consider to be a remarkable experience, how to have two-way conversations, making every contact with the donor count to move them along that emotional commitment continuum, if you like. In other words, to build a strong emotional connection. And I'd like to use this example I'll call her Anne. That's not her real name. But when I
let's honor some yeah, some
I'm sure
privacy
she
here.
wouldn't mind being named, but let's just for this instance call her Anne. I met Anne in 2022, and it was one of the relationships with high net worth individuals at the Leukaemia Foundation that I inherited as the new lead for this area. And Anne had had a number of relationship managers before me. So her relationship with Aleph started in 2019, and I came along 3 years later, and I was her third relationship manager. So that in itself was difficult. So I had to build and rebuild trust after a change of relationship manager, and to respect the experience and the connection the donor wished to have with, in this particular instance, with the CEO. And I could say that in 2019 and 2020, this donor was sitting at exactly where you wished her to be in that emotional commitment continuum, which is totally involved. By the time I met her in 22, 23, she had moved far left to the scale of still being interested, perhaps being a little bit reticent to engage because of the changes that had taken place. So it was my job to rebuild that trust. And I had to understand what motivated her. And one of the motivations was she had chemistry with the CEO previously, and the CEO previous to that, and that was the relationship she wanted to have. The big mistake I made was turning up to a meeting where she expected the CEO to be, and she got me. And I mean, don't worry, Anne and I are really, really close now. So we're on WhatsApp all the time when she's overseas, and everything's good. But it took some. And one of the things that I also noticed was that the only way we were able to get Anne to respond to my communications was to talk to her about what she had done over time and to acknowledge her lifetime giving. And then suddenly I could see that the emails were being responded to and that the text messages were promptly replied to. And we got Anne in the room over lunch in this year, in April of this year, and with the CEO and myself. And I'm really pleased to say that the relationship is much more towards the very warm end of the emotional commitment continuum. But it was about re-engaging and earning back that trust um, after several changes.
I
So,
love that
yeah.
term. I just have the emotional commitment continuum. I love that. I'm gonna steal that if you don't mind. I'm kidding. I won't steal it. But I'm
I
curious,
wish
what
I
were
could
the
say it was mine, Brian.
well, it's great. I don't care whose it is. I love it. The emotional commitment continuum. ECC. I think that'll man, that should be on a bumper sticker somewhere. But so tell me about the principles. So that's the story. What did you learn from that? Like what were the principles that went into the trust that you were ultimately able? Was it sounds like part of it was just kind of understanding her better, and the acknowledgement that it seemed like she wanted for her involvement previously, which completely could understand. Is that kind of what you learned or what you took away from that? I'm curious as to what was the takeaway from that.
I was really hell-bent on meeting this wonderful person, and I was going to make it happen no matter what, because I knew how important she was to the organization. But I kind of made it about me and about the organization for what we wanted. What I didn't hear clearly enough was that she wanted to meet with the CEO again. And so I can't emphasize enough the listening that a relationship manager needs to do. Really listen. It's not about you and the organization. This is a relationship here. This is meaningful, mutual. And I made it a bit one way. I needed to set the diaries were hard to align, so I just went for the meeting and I went for a date. And when she turned up, I could tell straight away that she was visibly shaken by the situation not being what she had requested. Um, and so, a big lesson for me. Took me 2 years to restore that relationship and to find the thing that actually resonated with her.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I mean, I think about just we're all competitive people, right? And we want to hit our goals. We want to accomplish certain things. And the idea, I was going to meet this woman no matter what. And it's so true that we can make this about ourselves and when it's not about us, it's completely about them, especially when we're raising funds or we're trying to sell something, right? Like the key is to put ourselves in their shoes and view things from their vantage point. Such a good reminder. I love that. So it kind of leads naturally into we all make mistakes, right? We all make, how do we learn unless we're making mistakes? And so not that I want this to be the Jacqueline Williams vulnerability hour where it's just all the mistakes you made, but I am curious, you know, if there are thoughts more about some of the mistakes you made as you started earlier in your career. But are there things that you just think, generally speaking, as well, that organizations or fundraisers or for the others watching, sales professionals or relationship managers kind of tend to get wrong when they're trying to engage these folks? I think you've set the stage pretty good. Let's not make it about ourselves. But I'm just curious to go down that road a little bit further.
What to avoid and what organizations and what fundraisers often get wrong is only being in touch at tax time, or on the anniversary of the donor's gift. Every regular contact matters. So, and I already mentioned, avoid having one-way conversations. As we said, it's not about me. It's not about my organization. This is a relationship, so it's two ways. What do people get wrong? It's not knowing the donor identity. So not knowing the what, who, why, and how of the donor, what appeals emotionally, what do they esteem, what life stage are they at, what's the tipping point for their commitment, who influences their decision, why us, why our organization, how do we link to their moral identity, how and when and do they wish to give? Obviously knowing how their wealth is acquired, because that gives you a sense of their meaning and their purpose and their value. And I guess the last thing to say is big mistake to make is not engaging donors to support in multiple ways, not assuming that because they've already given so generously this year that you wouldn't go to them with this exciting new imperative. Let them tell you, don't assume. And I think that's one of the big summary lessons I would take out of my career. And I if I may, Brian, I'll give you a perfect example of that, and it involves you.
Okay.
Remember last year or earlier this year, I came to you and I was frustrated about how I couldn't move this very formal relationship with the donor forward. And I'd been waiting, why hasn't he called? It was that kind of moment. And you reminded me that, perhaps our donors are not thinking about us as many times in the day as we are about them. They have a lot of things on their mind and in their purview that perhaps rather than sitting there and assuming and feeling awkward, like they didn't reply to my email, I can't seem to get through to a meeting with them through their EA. One particular relationship, it's a formal one. All meetings were always arranged in advance, months in advance. Usually taking that opportunity to present the next proposal, and it made me uncomfortable. The relationship wasn't as I feel the most comfort in, and I felt it was being a bit one way. It was like the roles were supplicant and the supplier. And I spoke to you about it, and I realized what had happened was it was a wonderful mistake. There was a lost email. I had sent the email to the donor. He'd accidentally deleted it. Maybe accidentally, maybe not. I'm sure it was accidental. But I just sat there in awkward silence going, why is he ghosting me? He's usually hugely polite and getting back, even if it's through his EA. And then I got brave. I wrote and I asked, and this was off your advice, just a really gentle short email saying, is there anything that has been upsetting or anything that's got in the way of our conversation? And I got the best, kindest, warmest reply in gratitude for my honesty. So there's another vulnerable moment. And I'm saying that the relationship is still very formal, but I think it's degrees less formal because I was able to say, is there anything standing in the way of our conversation?
Yeah. Well, it's such a good point. And I mean, this has come up in so many different conversations I've had through the years. This came up on another podcast that we had earlier, which is just, again, that thought. Our donors, our clients, our investors, people in general have their own lives going on and they're busy and they're not thinking about us nearly to the extent that we're thinking about them. And sometimes I love that. I forgot about that story. Sometimes just a gentle, hey, is anything wrong? Have I offended you? Have I been off putting in any sort of way? Chris Voss calls it a negative framing, right? If you know Chris Voss, he's the former FBI agent that wrote that book, Never Split the Difference. And he was a terrorist negotiator, right? And so one of his principles, right, I love his stuff, but is called negative framing. So putting something out there that isn't correct to get someone's no. What we oftentimes want is their no, not their yes, because the no means more than the yes sometimes. And so you put out there to this donor who placed your email, it got lost in the shuffle, it got deleted. Has anything happened? And immediately it was a positive no. No, absolutely nothing's wrong. I think you're fantastic. And Jack, I've known you long enough to know your donors love you, right? And you do such a great job of building relationships with them. But even someone as tenured and experienced as you know, when things feel uncomfortable, we can sometimes get a little bit insecure and think, oh no, I've done something wrong, when it isn't that at all. Hopefully that does is frees people up to kind of, in some ways, just say, I can take the pressure off a little bit. And sometimes it's okay to just ask very vulnerable questions, right? With tact and all that sort of stuff. And that, I think, was really good. Well, I say that and I mean it. Like, you have done such a great job of building great relationships with these very wealthy people. And you've had such a long standing history of doing that. I'm just curious, why do people buy from who they like and who they trust, right? Chemistry and trust is king or queen. People buy from who they like and who they trust. And when you think about a product, right, where there are competitive products, and somebody might say this manufacturer's product has these features, that manufacturer's product has those features, and it's kind of toss up for what you prefer. Now, in some cases, there are definitively better products on the market. And even in that scenario, people don't always buy the best product. They buy from people who they like and who they trust. Chemistry and trust. That is very easy to see from a purchase standpoint. But I could see some folks saying, well, how does that work with philanthropy when people give to causes that they care about? But how does the chemistry and trust with the fundraiser play into that scenario? Where does chemistry and trust with the fundraiser play into the dynamic of someone giving to an organization because they care about the cause? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And if I may bring Anne, who's not Anne, back into the mix, perfect example of, look, we are the number one blood cancer service provider in Australia. This particular donor, Anne, loves the product, as you say, loves the service. But for her, the chemistry and the people are of great value. So the recent example is, after having reconnected with her earlier in the year with the CEO, I invited Anne and her husband to the autumn gala. That was a partnership event. And I thought I was strategically mapping out the table and and putting our head of research, our dashing head of research, to the one side of this couple, and our equally charismatic other staff member on the other side, so that they could talk about more about the product. In this instance, about what we do in terms of impact research. In that instance, in terms of things that I know that are of interest to this couple, architecture, fashion. And I sat across the table looking after some other donors. And at the end of the event, Anne came over to me and said, I hardly spoke to you all night. You're across the table. And there seemed to be a tone of disappointment in that. And I made a joke of it. And I said, oh, you should have been on the dance floor with me. And then I went, Twig, I should have pulled Anne onto the dance floor with me. She wanted further connection to reinforce the re-engagement from earlier in the year. And I thought I was being strategic by spreading the relationship across the organization, and building chemistry with others. Good tactic, hate the word tactic, but good move, but not what the donor actually wanted in this moment. So another big lesson for me, I'm feeling like this is a podcast of moments of reflection and vulnerability for Jack. But there's another one. I hope that's relevant.
Well, it's so good. But, look, you are so good at, sometimes we just overthink things, and we all do that, right? But you are so good at building relationships and building trust. And so we can sometimes, I think it made all the sense in the world, but she was looking to build that relationship with you. And that's so good. That's so good. But yeah, I think we forget sometimes that we play a part as fundraisers. And I've been a fundraiser for a nonprofit before, right? Raising money for this critical mission that we're trying to accomplish. And we think, well, people give to that because they care about that. They don't care about me, but I'm in the mix, right? And the relationship that I build, it helps position things. It helps tell the story. The relationship is important. It's not just the relationship with the organization. It's the relationship with the people. As fundraisers and sales professionals, we represent the organization. So the relationship with us is the relationship in many ways with the organization or with the company, right? Okay, let me ask you this. How do you get in the room? How do you get access to these very hard to reach people?
Tough. It's tough, but to coin a Gonzales truism, start from the inside out. So access is the most effective way to start to build a relationship. If you don't have access, it's really hard, to do that. Who do we already know that knows the donor, or potential donor, who already has a built chemistry or relational capital with this donor? So you build a relationship with that person who is your conduit, who is your liaison, so that they can begin to trust you, and that the relationship that they may be introducing you to is in trusted hands. And also know how to ask for that introduction. Be specific in what you're asking for. Make it easy for the person to make that introduction to you. Let your contact know how and why you wish this introduction to be made, without burdening them with too much information. I think they're the top tips, really, Brian. Did I steal them from somebody who might also be on screen?
Look,
Trained
all
well.
I got to say is amen. You're, that's great. Any examples of approaches that didn't work?
Well, yes, absolutely. I think I might have shared this with you at some point. Like a novice, even with years of experience, like a novice, prospect referrals are just so important. And one big mistake, putting a list of 200 plus names in front of a board director or in front of a donor and say, do you know anyone on this list that you might introduce us to? That's a big one. Um, Related to that is, actually putting a map, like a Miro map in front of a board director or a donor, and asking the same question. I know you know these people. Could you introduce us? That's a biggie. And I'm sure you'll make comment to this, but my last one is, and mentioning it earlier, big mistake is being shy or reactive. So waiting on a response, thinking you're imposing. Not if you have diarised regular follow-throughs that are meaningful to the donor, it's never going to be intrusive, and they'll let you know when it is. If they've already starting to build some relational capital with you, they'll let you know. Yeah, so those two things. Don't put, multiple names in front of people. Don't put a map in front of them saying, "I know who you know." That's a bit transactional. And then also, don't be reactive, be proactive. So don't be shy about asking for the introduction or about asking for time.
Yeah. I'm curious. This has just come up. This is a thought that I'm going to throw out because I think so many people find because your thought about being shy, right, makes me think so much of that comes from intimidation, right? Where these are successful people, they're super interesting, they have these grandiose lives. And so a lot of that, I think, comes from just being intimidated. I'm just curious, how have you been able to, through the years, find your own footing to say, I'm standing on my own 2 feet?
Um, Look, I have been very lucky, and maybe your own approach, your own personal approach, and hopefully the warmth that you bring breaks some of those formalities down. But if I could go back to the example of Annabelle, the High Court judge, now you assume she's not going to have time for me. She's so busy, taking care of people's lives in a courtroom. um, so it's about finding ways that bridge her world and my world. So on a recent trip to Canberra, I asked if I could go into her offices there. And it's so nice to see her. We walked through the halls and you could see the portraits of other people like her, and it is intimidating. And then we get into her room and then leather couches, Chesterfield couches. There's a brilliant view of Canberra, and she takes her shoes off and sits on the couch, puts her legs up on the couch. And that was the one human moment where I knew she feels as comfortable with me as I do with her, even in this really intimidating environment. So it's the finding and creating that personal connection when you can. So to go into her world in rather than always bringing her to ours, to go into her world was a really important thing to do. So this
I
is where
love
you
that.
do the stuff you do, and everyone, the security guard nodding to her, and I said, "Do I need to curtsy?" And she go, "No, don't." So that business of that little bit of a joke, it may not land, it might be a terrible mum joke or whatever. But, I don't know. I think that's I think that's what I'm trying to get at is the finding the meaningful to the other person, and 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 finding yourself in their world so that you have a better appreciation, and perhaps not being intimidated by that world,
Yeah.
because they've welcomed you into it. Isn't that welcome enough?
Well, and even if you are I love the principle here of getting into their world where that is appropriate.
Mm.
People are proud of their lives. They are proud of the things they've done and they've accomplished. And being able to get into their world is such just I think a great principle for life, let alone you know, building relational capital and access and deepening trust and relationships with ultra wealthy people. But I love the principle of saying it's not always bringing them into our world, is saying to what extent can we get into their world and see what their lives are? And that's how they know you care about them. And it's not just about what you get from them. And so I think the thought that I have that's coming from this is I think if you're watching this, you should ask if you can come visit them, right? Where it's appropriate. Like they're oftentimes not going to assume that you want to come see their thing, right? They're not, I think people, uh, that assumption gets made on both sides, right? Both by the fundraiser, the sales professional, and by the thing. And so, as you're hearing about things going on in that person's life or with if there are opportunities to show interest, and then ask where you can come and get involved or see or participate or view or visit where their world is. I think that is a great principle for winning in this space.
It's gold, Brian. And just a really quick add-on about Anna, my 82-year-old. I asked a small thing, can I bring you a gift on your 80th birthday? And she said, better still bring it to my party. Right? So I
Great.
then met her children, her grandchildren, her besties, her daughters, her son-in-law. So
You got
yeah,
invited into her world, right?
yeah,
And that
yes.
takes some time. It doesn't happen overnight. But the more you take interest in their world, the more they're going to invite you into their world. And the more they invite you in, you want to talk about relationships that last, right? Donors that last, investors that last, right? Clients. It is when you get into their world and we actually really start to build a relationship. And that is possible. It might take some time, but it's possible. But it starts with the interest that you take, right? And them knowing that you're actually interested in their world outside of just the thing that they've bought or given to or donated to or invested in, right? Okay. One last question. I've taken up so much of your time.
Okay.
One last piece of
Mm.
advice that you'd give to our audience, the one thing people need to know, the one thing you wish you would have known when you started, or the one thing that you keep coming back to time and time again.
Brian, you're going to ask me for one. I'm going to give you three.
Okay, I'll take it.
Look, I've already touched on this. Never assume. Never assume that the donor is ghosting you, doesn't wish to hear from you, that the donor would not want to give more than once a year. Don't assume. Ask. Second thing is listen. It's a relationship manager's superpower. Listen closely and have the discipline to record what you hear in a way that you could easily show the donor, share back with the donor. And the final one, which I know you absolutely agree with, Brian, is consistent, like be disciplined, consistent, timely, meaningful check-ins. Going back to the donors, not thinking of you as much as you are of them. Don't sit by the phone waiting. Donors want to hear from you because they've invested in your organization. So be disciplined, put it in your diary. You are never too busy to make time for the people you love in your personal life. Why would you be too busy, administering other things? You should put it into your diary for those quarterly check-ins or more regularly, as appropriate. So, sorry, I gave you three. I hope they help.
Hey, look, I will always take more than what I asked for. Well, the wonderful Jack Williams down in beautiful Melbourne, Australia of the Leukaemia Foundation. Thank you so much. I'm Brian Gonzales, the CEO of Wealth Quotient, and this has been Relational Capital, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Brian. See ya.
Relational Capital is produced by Wealth Quotient, where our mission is to help sales and fundraising professionals access and engage the ultra-affluent market more effectively and efficiently. To learn more or schedule a call, visit mywealthq.com. I'm Brian Gonzales. Thanks for listening.